Many years ago, a peasant who worked in the fields was arrested by a powerful baron and imprisoned unfairly in that baron's dungeon. And for 20 long years, the prisoner lived alone in a dark, cold cell. And every day throughout those 20 years, a guard with a fierce, angry face would creak open the wooden cell door, set a tray of food and water on the floor, then slide it across the floor to the middle of the cell, and without a word, he'd slam the door shut behind him, leaving the prisoner alone again. For 20 long years, that prisoner looked out at a tiny window at the very top of his cell and watched the changing sky, the stars, the sun, the moon moving across the sky, and he longed to breathe fresh air again. He longed to be free. And for years, he held out hope that one day he would be rescued or set free. But as time wore on and the years passed, he eventually gave up hope. And when he could no longer bear the pain and the loneliness of his imprisonment, he decided the only way he was ever going to get out of that cell was to die. Didn't want to commit suicide. So after some thought, he decided what he was going to do was attack the fierce, angry-looking guard when he brought him the food in the morning. And he hoped that the guard would respond by killing him in self-defense. Once he decided, the prisoner lay awake all night, waiting anxiously for the dawn. And a few minutes before the guard was due to show up, the prisoner eased across the cell and crouched beside the door, ready to jump the minute that door opened. But as he moved, he lost his balance. He stumbled and grabbed the door handle to steady himself. To his astonishment, the handle turned easily under his hand, and when it did, the door clicked open. And in that instant, the prisoner realized there had never been a lock on that door. For 20 long years, that door had been unlocked, and he'd never even tried to open it because he believed he was a prisoner and that door was locked. But now, incredibly, the door opened for him. Cautiously, he peered out into the narrow hallway beyond the door. The angry, ferocious guard was there, lounging against the stone wall. That guard, who had terrified him for all those years, looked up at him with no expression and made no move to stop or harm him. So the prisoner was able to walk right past the guard to the stone stairway at the end of the hall. He climbed those stairs nervously, looking over his shoulder, heart pounding, waiting for all those things, all those fears that had haunted him for the past 20 years to come true. But none of them did. In fact, nothing happened. The two armed guards at the top of the stairs ignored him as he walked right on by. He shouldered open the huge front gate and he walked across the drawbridge to his freedom. The truth was that prisoner was held in his prison, not by his physical circumstances, not by the door or the guard. He was held in that prison by what he believed, by the story he was telling himself about the door and the guard. It was all about a story. And for all those years, he never even dared to challenge that story, his beliefs. He never dared push past his thoughts and his fears. He just waited and hoped things would get better. But when he finally dared to challenge those fears, those old stories of imprisonment, he was able to set himself free. So, what does that fable have to do with our anxiety? I think it has everything to do with our anxiety. And I mean everything. Just like that prisoner, it isn't necessarily the circumstances of our lives. It isn't the door or the guards that's keeping us a prisoner of our fears. It's the stories we tell ourselves about that door and the guard. The story we tell ourselves of what's waiting beyond that door. And the stories we tell ourselves of how we don't believe we're capable and afraid to imagine what would our life look like beyond that door. So how do we set ourselves free? We do that by changing the story we tell ourselves. You know that story we repeat over and over to ourselves, and maybe to anyone else who will listen to us. You know that story. Well, this is who I am. This is how I failed. This is why I feel shameful. This is why I feel trapped. This is why I never succeed. And this is why I'm not good enough. I'm talking about those stories, the things we tell ourselves that keep us trapped in that prison of fear and anxiety. But what if those stories aren't true? What if there isn't a lock on our door? What if you succeeded more than you failed, accomplished all sorts of things that you don't give yourself credit for? What if there is nothing to be ashamed of? And what if you are good enough? What if you finally decided to tell yourself a story that tells the truth about who you are, a story that supports and empowers you past your fear and into the freedom beyond? Well, if you're ready to change that story once and for all, let's begin by looking at where you learned that story in the first place. Let's go back in time to a place where some of these stories may have taken root, back to your childhood, and more specifically, back to the playground. Let's talk about the way we've traditionally treated little boys and girls, the different messages we give them about who they are and what they can do while at play. We don't consciously do it. We do it unconsciously. And of course, I am going to talk in generalizations here. Over the years, thank goodness, views on traditional gender roles have shifted, and things may have been completely different for you. But I'm going to share with you kind of a generic example of how things might have been for someone, just to get you thinking about your past and what you learned on the playground or in your childhood. And as I talk, think back to what your experience was as a child, what you were told about you, what you learned, and how that affects your anxiety today. All right. Imagine you're sitting at a playground watching a group of children at play. Everybody's having a good time until a child falls off the swing. In our first example, the child Mary falls off the swing and starts to cry. Her caregiver jumps up, rushes over, hugs her, comforts her, and tells her it's okay. But when Mary's brother Mark does exactly the same thing, he falls off the swing and is hurt and starts crying, he's told, hey, you're fine, walk it off, big boys, don't cry. No one rushes to his aid. Same injury, different reaction, and very different message. And when you think about the differences in those messages, it's really easy to see why girls and later women are more likely to react to a negative situation with fear and anxiety, because we learned in that incident on the playground that we don't have to take care of ourselves or our emotion or our pain on our own. Someone will rescue us. We need to wait for someone to come along and tell us it's okay and what to do. While boys, and then later men, are taught to shake it off and be self-reliant. And it may be painful in the moment, but the message is They can take care of themselves. They can trust themselves. And when left on their own, that's what they learn how to do. All right, example 2. Let's look again at Mary. She gets stuck halfway up the climbing wall. She can't go up, she can't go down, and she starts crying and calls for help. Her caregiver, again, comes to her rescue, comforts her, and says, "Oh, Mary, why don't you just go play in the sandbox?" Passively and alone. On the other hand, Mark, same situation, calls for help, and he's told, "Hey, figure it out yourself. You can do it. You don't need help." He isn't allowed to back down from danger. He faces it, and he gets through. All right. So Mary has learned on the playground there are dangers in this world that she should probably avoid because she needs someone else to get her through, and she's probably just not equipped to handle them. She's told, "You can't, don't try." And because she doesn't try, she never learns how powerful she is. And when she grows up into a young woman, she's going to have fewer coping skills than Mark. And that lack of coping skills puts her at a higher risk for anxiety. What has Mark learned? Hey, it's okay to feel the fear and keep going. He can trust himself. He's capable of handling things. And just let me get on my soapbox for a minute. That's the lesson we need to give all our children, all of them. You are capable of overcoming obstacles. Go ahead. You can do this, because when these children get older, chances are they'll trust themselves. They'll trust their feelings. They'll trust that they can take action. And truthfully, action is the very best way I know to overcome anxiety. So let me ask you, what did you learn in your childhood? What did you learn on the playground? What messages did you get about you as a child? What did you believe about yourself? And how do those thoughts and beliefs affect your life today? If you're not sure, I'd like to give you a few examples about how those lessons learned in our childhood can translate into anxiety that we feel today. Let's start with how those thoughts and beliefs can show up in the workplace. Let's look at Jen. Jen learned on the playground to both fear and avoid confrontation. When she's passed over for a richly deserved promotion at work, she doesn't speak up for herself. Instead, she lies awake nights staring at the ceiling, trying to convince herself that she couldn't have done that job anyway. It was for the best that she didn't speak up. Then there's Serena, who learned on the playground that she didn't matter, and she certainly shouldn't speak up for herself. She knew she deserved to be paid more. And when she finally found the courage to ask for a raise during her quarterly review, her boss says no. And Serena decides, well, I shouldn't rock the boat. And she didn't ask again. Instead, she continues to bite her nails and drink a second glass of wine after dinner to keep her feelings of failure and fear at bay. Phyllis learned on the playground, play it safe, no danger for me. She dreamed of starting her own business. And when she shared her dreams with girlfriends, they all told her scary stories about failure and disaster. They reminded her she was lucky enough to have a job, and it's better to be safe than sorry. Phyllis listened and never took a single step toward her dream. Now, if any of this sounds familiar, it isn't surprising, because the research shows women worry much more about work than men. And when you think about it, we worry for good reasons. Women have to work harder to get the credit we deserve at work, and some of us are actually still facing discrimination and harassment on the job. This brings me to our thoughts and beliefs about money. we women are much more likely to lose sleep worrying over money. Again, it's for a good reason. It is no wonder women's biggest fear is that they're going to end up being a bag lady on the streets, penniless. And here's the reason why. First of all, women are much more likely to live in poverty than men. We're paid only 3/4 of what men are paid for the same job. We're the ones most likely to take off time to care for our children and aging parents. And so we are much more likely to have less money set aside for retirement. Now, here's the kicker, adding insult to injury. We are likely to live 7 years longer than men. So we actually need more money than men to cover those extra years in retirement. Of course, we worry about money, about outliving our money. We would be crazy not to. But that's the external. The internal is kind of concerning to me. What women are taught about ourselves and our abilities to handle money, what we learned on that playground of money can be a huge factor in our financial well-being. In an article published in Psychology Today titled Men and Women and Money, authors Olivia Mellan and Katrina Piskaldo describe a really interesting study done by a major financial institution. In this study, high school students were asked how good they were with math and money. In general, the boys answered, "Hey, we're pretty good." The girls answered, "Oh, we're not that good with either of those things." But get this, both groups had exactly the same information. They were both equally good at math and money. But the girls just weren't as confident in themselves or their abilities. Oh, yikes. Okay, let's move on to relationships and how our thoughts and beliefs about who we are affect our relationships. Studies show it's much more important for women to have good relationships with friends and family, much more important to us than men. And when our relationships are on the rocks, we work and worry and stay up at night, desperately trying to make things better, to make things okay. And I know about this personally. This really hits close to home for me. Anyway, but we women are the ones who are more likely to worry about the health of our partners and our children. We run ourselves ragged, trying to balance everybody, our roles as mother, daughter, partner, friend, professional, trying to make sure everybody else is healthy and everybody else is happy, and we're all okay. So let me ask you, how do you feel about your relationships today? And what did you learn about relationships when you were on the playground, when you were a child? Now, all that running around brings me to the subject of how we spend our time and how our thoughts and beliefs impact the way we spend our time. Let me tell you about Kim, who got up every morning, made herself a cup of coffee, and started folding the laundry. By the time her partner and 2 children came down for breakfast, she planned dinner, packed lunches, answered emails, emptied the dishwasher, and poured the cereal. And as she headed out the door for work, Kim was already running behind schedule. No matter how fast and hard she worked, Kim never was going to be able to get everything done. Now, Kim had learned on the playground that other people's needs were far more important than her own, and she ran herself ragged, trying to get it done for everyone else. No room for herself, no room for her own needs on the list, the to-do list. No time for Kim. Sound familiar? As Linda Wasmer Andrews writes in her article, Why Women Need Me Time and How They Can Claim It, I love the title, a survey done by the Pew Research Center found that women do far more than their share of housework and childcare, even if we're working full time. And according to a study done by Real Simple magazine, 52% of American women have less than 90 minutes a day of free time, and 29% of us have less than 45 minutes a day, which means we are far too busy to do anything to take care of our own health. We don't get enough sleep. We don't take time to eat a healthy diet. We don't have time to hit the gym. And this is the hardest thing of all. We give up doing the things that bring our souls peace, and we suffer for it. So here we are. Women are told we can have it all, and we're encouraged to do it all. We're told we can be great mothers, successful business women. We can look great, feel great, and still have time left over to have fun. And when we don't or can't, we worry. And we decide and feel that we're not good enough. Just talking about this makes me tired. So let's wrap up this module by asking you, have you recognized yourself in any of the stories above? Do you have a clearer idea of what's causing your anxiety on the inside? If you don't worry. In the next module, I'm going to help you really get to know your anxiety in detail. We're going to talk about specific symptoms and explore the impact anxiety is having on your life today. Then we're going to get down to the business of helping you deal with that anxiety in ways that help set you free from your fear.